Do you think metas are a huge deal that people should be worried about?
Not particularly. I think it's just the way the game evolves. And, there's obviously always going to be things that are OP. And the best, at the end of the day, the best team always ends up winning. So you can't really complain that, it's just, not my meta or whatever. Because at the end of the day, Team Liquid has won for 2 years in a row. And you can't tell me that, some of these aren't their meta. Or even if they aren't their meta, they still succeeded in them. So, I don't think it's just a valid excuse. I think part of being a pro is adapting to every shift in meta. And, if you can't adapt, then you're just not going to do well.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Deep Dives into the Minds of Esports. My name is Blake Panashevitz, and today's guest is a Canadian who plays for FlyQuest, who could be representing North America come Worlds as of this time of this recording, as it hasn't been decided yet. Please let me introduce Juan Guibert, maybe better known as JayJ. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's exciting to have you on here. I think I butchered your name a little bit, but I apologize. It's okay. It's always the work in progress. So I'm excited to have you on the show. It should be fun. There isn't a lot of deep dive interviews into who you are as a person, which I think is a really fun thing. One of the things I always like to start off the show very simple, to kind of make it easier for us to kind of get into it. And one of the things that I found out about you is you like a very interesting style of food. And I wanted to check if there was more background to this. You like Peruvian food, right? Did I say that right? Okay. Yes. Is it because your family's Peruvian, or do you just really enjoy the food?
It's because, if I want to give you my whole life story from the down up, I was born in Lima, Peru. Then we moved to Canada, Toronto, when I was 7 years old, me and my family. And then I lived in Toronto till I was 20. And then I moved over here in LA to compete.
Okay. That's pretty cool.
That's where my Peruvian food, my liking of Peruvian food comes from.
Do you get to eat a lot of Peruvian food in LA? I imagine not that often.
Not at all. I've had it maybe 2 or 3 times since I've been here. There's an Argentinian place nearby we've been to a few times that has some Peruvian food, so I always get really excited when we go there. It's just a lot of familiar flavors to me. And
So if you had to describe Peruvian food to someone who's never eaten it, because I might have eaten Peruvian food, but I don't know. I think I've had Argentinian food. But if you had to describe what kind of flavors encapsulate that, what would you describe it as?
It's kind of hard to describe because it's very unique in that it has a lot of different types of food. So in Peru, there's a decently large size of Japanese and Chinese population, as well as Hispanic population, obviously. And so a lot of the food there is fusion food. And so I would definitely say it caters to both the Eastern and Western palate in some sort. But yeah, it varies just so much. We have our own type of fried rice and stir fry, which are obviously more Asian dishes, but we also have our own empanadas and ceviche, which are very South American dishes. So it's just all over the place, and that's kind of part of why I love it.
Okay, so if you had to name give me 4 spices that you would always find in your house, what would those spices be?
Well, we use, like I said, soy sauce is a staple in Peruvian cooking. We use a lot of MSG, which I know a lot of people used to be pretty against MSG, but I think people are more realizing that it's actually not that bad for you in moderation, everything. There's a lot of different chilies and stuff that are hard to find in North America, or in stores, but we use a lot of just Peruvian chilies and flavors. And then I would say not really much of a seasoning, but just seafood in general we use a lot.
Okay.
In a lot of, because Peru is right along the coast in South America, so we just eat a lot of seafood as well.
So kind of looking back at that, living in Peru, do you remember a lot of living in Peru? You were pretty young and you left when you were 7, but do you have any fond memories of living in Peru?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like I said, I was pretty little, but I do remember quite a bit of like just growing up and like I live in the capital, which is Lima, and so it was a pretty big city. And also like all my family lives there, and so I have pretty good memories of like going to my aunts and uncles' houses and like hanging out with my cousins and like playing video games at a young age with my cousins, that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Do you have a big family then?
Yeah, very big. My dad has I think 5 or 6 siblings, and
wow.
my mom also has 4 or 5 siblings, and so yeah, we have a pretty big family on both sides.
So you living in Canada for such a long time, did you get to see your family that often? Because I imagine that like when you traveled over, you wouldn't get to see them that much.
I visited Peru a handful of times since we moved to Toronto. Yeah, probably like every 3 or 4 years we'd go back and visit, and so I still get to see them from time to time. And also, I do know now that social media is so big, I get to constantly see all my cousins, what they're up to, like school, work, all my aunts and uncles, like, you know, traveling or doing whatever they want to do, just like family reunions. And yeah, I don't generally feel like left out or anything.
So is family culture a big deal to you and your family? Is that something that is kind of, because I've heard it a lot with different cultures, and I wouldn't say American culture, it's that big, but a lot of like South American cultures, as well as like a lot of like Eastern cultures, it tends to be very tight-knit family. And you mentioning both of those two regions having an impact, is family like a really close-knit thing for you guys?
Yeah, I would say so. I think definitely. Oh, my monitor just turned off because I haven't been moving or anything. But yeah, family is pretty important to both my parents. They've always tried their best to keep in touch and like call their siblings as often as they can. And for me as well, like, you know, when I'm away from home, I try to call my parents really often. I know some people who that aren't as close with their family will only like call them once a month, once every couple months. But I mean, in comparison to some families I've heard of where they call each other like every day, I guess we're not super tight knit, but I would say in a way, yeah, in comparison to most people I know my age, we're a pretty tight knit family.
Do you have any brothers or sisters?
I have a brother, yes.
One brother. Older or younger?
Older. He's 27 years old, yes.
Oh, okay. Same age as me. Okay. So quite a bit older then. So what was it like being the younger brother growing up? Was it one of those relationships where the older brother is like, you're so annoying and...
Yeah, kind of. I remember like getting beat up a lot, and like you would do the thing where like you take the controller and put it like under the PlayStation, so I think I was playing but not playing. And then by the time I was old enough to actually play, he'd just beat me at every game. But yeah, we did have like that pretty typical like older younger brother relationship until I was maybe like 12 or 13, and we started getting along pretty well because obviously we realized like we have a lot of similar interests, and we just started like hanging out a lot more rather than fighting all the time.
Yeah, that's probably a good feeling when you get to the point where it's not fighting all the time.
Yeah, for sure.
So did you ever get to go to school in Peru, or did you kind of miss that boat?
I did kindergarten in Peru, and that was it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So did they? I'm assuming the language there is Spanish.
Yeah.
Okay. So I take it that you speak fluent Spanish then.
Pretty well. Yeah.
Okay. So when you first moved over to the States, you would have been starting like first grade. How was your English coming to not the States, to Canada? I'm assuming you went to an English school, but you could have went to a French school, I guess. But I'm assuming English. What was it like when you first came to Canada and you were being immersed in this different culture?
When we came over, I didn't speak a lick of English, so I was put into ESL classes, English as a second language classes, and I remember the first year I was here, I pretty much just like didn't get anything. The only course I didn't well in was like math because it's not a language thing.
Yeah.
And then by the time my second year in Toronto came around, I don't know how, but I just had picked up the language over the summer break. I think just like playing video games with my cousins and like watching TV in English all the time, I just kind of absorbed it. And
Mm-hmm.
like, it's kind of a blur in my mind, but I just remember not knowing it, and then summer break, and then being like near fluent. So.
Okay, that's real. What do your parents do for a living?
Well, my dad is retired, and he used to be a civil engineer in Peru, but right now he's retired in Toronto. And my mom was an accountant in Peru and is also currently still an accountant.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What was the reason for wanting to leave Peru and come to Canada?
Well, it's pretty little, so I don't remember the exact reasoning, but some of the reasonings my parents have always told me is like better healthcare,
Mm-hmm.
better education for me and my brother, and just like more stable politically, and just mostly politically, because in Peru there's a lot of different like corruption scandals, terrorism, like violence. So yeah.
Okay, I mean that kind of makes sense. How did you like Canada?
I love Canada. I mean, ever since I moved there, even when I'm here, I miss home a lot all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And part of it is because now, like, I have so many friends and my family there that makes me want to go back.
Yeah.
And that's part of what makes me miss it. But I also it's just a really nice place to live, I think. Like I said, like healthcare is a really big thing there. And like, obviously it's something that I took for granted when I moved here, and I realized like I have to pay to go to the doctor and to get treatment for stuff. So yeah. And
so
also
it's not like all those myths that we hear about like it being so terrible up there that you can never get into the hospital, that you'll just die.
No, it does. I mean, like, if you're actually dying, you will get through quickly. But if you have something that's not too serious, then yeah, it might take longer than it would here, for example. But
Okay.
I find that it has worked out for me just fine. So, or for most people I know. I don't know anyone who complained because the hospital took too long or whatever.
Yeah, I chopped my fingers off when I was like 15, and they got the medical bill because the insurance didn't go through right. $70,000. I know,
Jesus
right?
Christ.
Like they tried to. It's insane. So like when I hear about free healthcare, I'm like, oh, I would really like that sometimes, because like just some of that stuff is pretty bad. And it's nice to hear a different perspective, because obviously in the States we hear a very mixed perspective from different people, and hearing from someone who actually uses the system is always kind of a cool thing. So growing up in Canada, what was school like for you?
In general, it was pretty good. I've always been like a pretty good kid, and like school-wise. And my parents obviously had a big impact on that. They were very adamant about doing well in school. Like being part of the reason we moved to Canada is like us getting an education, doing well in school, going to college, getting a good job. Of course, I didn't make it all the way through that part, but
you got the good job.
Yeah, I mean, I got parts of the way there.
Yeah, you got parts of the way. So, what type of kid were you at school? Like, I would say that I'm like kind of the stereotypical like nerd kid who was like just into like Dungeons and Dragons and didn't really hang out with the football people. Did you have to? Were you in like any cliques or anything like that, or did you have to deal with that? But you also seem very charismatic, so I could see you being able to talk to people and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think in like elementary school, middle school, I was pretty shy, nerdy kid. Then come high school, I would say I was pretty extroverted, and yeah, I would just get along with everybody. And if you talk to me, we became friends. Then we were friends. If you never talked to me, then probably weren't friends. But I feel like I got along pretty well with pretty much everyone, like jocks, nerds, all like
Okay. Did you ever do any sports through school?
Yeah, I swam in high school. I still do swim from time to time. I'm actually going to swim after this. But,
oh, are you?
Yeah.
Oh, is that what you do to keep fit, is swim?
Yeah, I actually just picked it back up a couple of weeks ago. I tried like last year, but I had like wrist issues, which I think is like pretty out there. The last year I had pretty bad wrist issues, so I couldn't swim because it actually hurt, but now I can. And so I swam through high school, and I was also a lifeguard and swim instructor for my last year of high school as well as college.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever see anyone drowning that you had to save?
Yeah, I had to save a few people. One of them was just like a little kid who just fell into the deep end, and the other two were like dudes around my age, like 21-year-olds who just like didn't know their limit and were just swimming in the deep end and then just got too tired in the middle. And yeah.
What's it like doing that where you have to jump in and save someone?
It's not fun. It's pretty like stressful when that does happen, but it's pretty rare. I worked there for like 3 years and I only had to do it 3 times, so.
Mm-hmm. What goes through your head though? Like as you're jumping in, you're like, oh my god, or are you just like need to move fast? Like what is kind of going through your head when that happens?
It pretty much just goes to your training. Like you don't even think, you just kind of do what you've been trained to do. And so it's just like, as soon as you see it, at first you're like, oh shit, I have to do something. But then once you jump, I pretty much just like let muscle memory take over.
Do you ever have to worry about saving someone? Because I know some people can like thrash around, and I know that there's sometimes a risk that people can actually drown the lifeguard if they're not careful. Like, did you have any risk doing that?
Yeah, that's part of your training, is like learning how to save somebody without letting them drown you. And yeah, there's like specific ways to do that depending on the situation. But most of the time it's pretty easy because we got like these big these big foam tubes.
Yeah.
And we carry them with us all the time. And so you just kind of stuff them into it. And that's the way you prevent them from getting on you. They just lean on that instead of you. And then you just drag that. Yeah. Oh, my screen turned off again.
Oh, you're okay. You're okay. You're just going to shift every now and then from light to being dark. It's like dark side versus light side. So kind of looking at school growing, you mentioned that you did really well. Was there a high, and you mentioned that your parents kind of pushed that. Was there always this, did you always have the feeling of I need to do well in school because of the fact that we came over here? Or was it like, I don't want to upset my parents?
It's a little of both. I actually would say like around the start to middle of high school, I did slack off quite a bit because like through elementary school, I didn't really try and like breeze through it and did really well. So then my work habits weren't great, but I always told my parents, like, you know, come crunch time, come 12th grade, which in Canada is all that really matters for your college education, or for your college applications is like your grades in grade 12. And so I told them like, come grade 12, I'll do great. I know like right now, I was still doing fine. I just wasn't doing amazing, you know?
Yeah.
And so, I always promised them I was going to do great in grade 12. So when grade 12 came around, I did fine. And I got into the University of Toronto, which was a pretty good school. Yeah.
So I actually never knew that the last year of Canada actually means more than everything else. Because in the States, they average all 4 years. So, and then you have to take standardized tests, which are terrible. But so it's kind of an interesting concept.
It's much nicer than having to worry through all 4 years, I think. I don't quite get it, because I feel like if you're a struggling kid, then you're probably not going to pick it up in 9th grade or 10th grade. You probably pick it up come 11th or 12th grade.
That is unfortunate. So you're going through high school. How you mentioned that you were playing video games at a young age. Okay, you mentioned you were playing with like friends and stuff, and one of the things that I've actually found with both working with pro gamers as well as like talking to a whole slew of them now on this show, is there's normally like a defining year where like video games end up becoming way more important, and they start to kind of have the priority shifts to them being really important on the list. Do you think that you had an age when that happened?
Not necessarily. I mean, I always played video games as far back as I can remember. Like elementary school, I played tons of COD and console games, and then around grade 9, 10-ish is when I picked up League. And then once I picked up League, I could not go back to playing any other games. So it was just a game for me until now.
Mm-hmm. And so, like, grade 9, 10, you kind of just played all of League, and it was there. Yeah. See, you have a very interesting story, because you obviously played League in college, and you kind of took almost like what you would expect from, like, traditional sports, where they go into college to play the sport. You're actually probably one of the few people that I mean, there's a couple of other people I know, but you're one of the few people in, like, the esports scene overall who's kind of done this now. It's starting to become a little bit more prevalent, I would say, but like, you look at like 5 years ago and it wasn't really a thing. And I remember working with RMU like early on, before I was hired with the team out, and so like that was one of the teams that I kind of worked with, but you kind of took that almost like traditional route. So when you were looking at schools to apply to, were you dead set on University of Toronto already?
No, actually, there's a school that was much closer to where I lived called the University of Guelph Humber. And I had already accepted my offer to that school, but then I got the offer from U of T kind of late. And so I was just like, oh, okay, I guess I'll go to this one instead. It was a little further. It was like an hour commute, but it was a much better school academically. And so, yeah, I decided to go there instead.
What do you want to go to school for?
I was studying finance and economics.
Okay. What made you want to go into finance and economics?
I just felt like it was a pretty safe thing to do. Like I could easily get a desk job that would be decent paying, and I'm generally pretty good at like math and like logic problem solving, not so good at like biology and chemistry. And so, yeah, I definitely knew I wanted to go somewhere within that field.
So you're looking at this and you get accepted to the University of Toronto. You're going to take this. How did you get into the league team there? Because I imagine because you didn't know you were accepted, I imagine it wasn't a thought at the time right away to like just join up to this team like a lot of other schools where they get scholarships and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I actually was playing while I was in high school. I played on several challenger teams that were like, you know, pretty random. Some of them were way better than others. Like some of the people I played with while I was in high school were like DeMonte, Deftly, Hakuo, Dardoch, Acadian, Alarim. There's just like so many people who are pros now, or even LCS who, were just amateur players back then. And I forgot what my point was. Oh yeah, so I got into the University of Toronto college team because through those challenger teams, I knew the University of Toronto coach. His name was his username was So Jaded. His real name was Mike. And once he found out that I was going to go to U of T, he said, "Do you want to try out? Our current jungler's plat, you're challengers, so if you try out, you'll probably just get it." So I did try out, and I got in. And pretty much that was it.
Okay, now you mentioned jungle. This is kind of something that I wanted to get at. Is that you actually were a jungler for a long time. You are currently no longer a jungler. When did that transition happen?
It happened between my first and second years of college. So yeah, I was a jungler all the way up until season 6 or 7. And what had happened was, coming into my second year, we knew that we had 2 players who were Masters or Challenger, and they both wanted to try out for our team. But all of our support tryouts were Diamond 2 or Diamond 3 or lower. And so I'd already been playing a bunch of support and solo queue for fun. So I said, you know what, fuck it. Why don't I just play support, and then we'll have a pretty decent jungler. And, you know, if our jungler needs any help, I can teach him stuff that I know. And so I just kind of, made the leap, picked up as much as I could, and we did pretty well.
Was there ever a thought of dropping out of college to pursue like esports full time? Because obviously you were pretty good and you were highly rated up there, and you probably knew you already mentioned a ton of pros who are now pros / working on the pro scene / academy or whatever was the academy back then. I can't remember what it was called, honestly. But you were obviously like playing with all these different people. Did the thought ever occur to you to drop out of school to go pursue esports?
No, and that's something that I always knew was I would never drop out of school until I got either an LCS offer or a Challenger offer. And yeah, that didn't happen until Academy came around and FlyQuest picked us up. But yeah, I always knew that I never wanted to drop out unless it was a sure thing. Just because that's kind of the type of person I am. I'm very risk averse, and so I definitely would not have dropped out if I thought I would just have like a 10% chance of going pro. It had to be like a 99.9% chance to go pro before I made the jump.
You've been a big proponent for collegiate esports, I would say. I've seen a lot of things where you've kind of commented on how it was very positive for you. Do you think that more people should be looking at collegiate esports versus just esports?
In what sense do you mean?
Like in the sense that instead of trying to just pursue esports, they should really be trying to pursue some sort of education related towards and looking to take the collegiate esport path that will guarantee them some semblance of something if the esports thing doesn't work out.
Okay. Yeah, for sure. I know a lot of players who are currently in collegiate and they want to go pro and they neglect their studies. And I know a lot of collegiate players who don't want to go pro, do their studies well, still play a decent amount of league and compete in collegiate and do well in collegiate. And, I think the latter is smarter in my opinion, because having like your chances of going pro are like, even if you're challenger league player, are pretty slim. Just because there's not that many spots, right? But your chance, so you have to have a backup plan, in my opinion, if you're trying to go pro. And so, like, my backup plan was get a normal desk job, and like just go from there. But yeah, I definitely think that more people should be aiming to get an education while trying to go pro at the same time. And that's just the safest and like best path, in my opinion. Especially if you're already a challenger league player, you'll likely be able to go to a scholarship school and at least get a decent level of education from those schools, and while still trying to go pro and playing in a team environment, which is super important.
Do you still follow the collegiate scene at all?
Not as much as I used to, obviously, but yeah, definitely I keep up with like a bit of the Eastern Conference because that's where we used to play, and I keep up with like Maryville. I'm still friends with some of the guys on there, and just kind of like the top level teams, like the UCIs and University of Western Ontario, is a Canadian team, did pretty well this year. But yeah, I do keep up with it a bit.
Do you think that there are any like new talents coming through the collegiate scene that you could actually see being in like the full-on LCS or anything like that? Because one of the things that gets commented on all the time is that there's not really any like talent in NA. Like people tend to comment on that. Do you see any of this talent that's kind of coming through there, or do you kind of agree with the assessment that, you know what, there really just isn't NA talent?
Yeah, so I've heard of a lot of collegiate players that currently are like or have done really well in collegiate. The ones that have gotten offers lately that I've heard of turned them down for their education, and so I think it was just kind of unlucky because I've heard of like 3 or 4 players that did that. But there's definitely some talent in collegiate that could go straight to academy and probably succeed within the next year or so. I can't think of any names off the top of my head, but I think there are for sure.
Okay. Do you think that thought that gets kind of thrown out there, that there's no talent in NA, right? That just gets thrown around quite a bit. Do you think that that's just bullshit, or do you think that people are like, is there some other reason why people come to this conclusion?
I think people come to the conclusion because just the quality of solo queue games on average is really poor, and I think that's the case right now because a few years back, or a couple of years back, Riot made the queue time shorter, so you'd get more games, and like the elo disparity is bigger, right? And so right now you can be rank 1, you'll still get in games with Diamond 1s, whereas before you would be rank 1, you'd probably have to wait half hour to get into a game, but you'd get in a game and it's all challengers, and so the game quality would be much better. And so there's a trade-off, right? Yeah. But I think the You have to meet somewhere halfway. I think I wouldn't mind waiting 15, 20 minutes per game if it means I'm going to get into a good quality game. But right now, that's not the case. And that's why a lot of people just say NA has no talent, because the quality of solo queue is really bad. And so even if there is talent, they're probably not taking every game as seriously as they would be if they were challenged literally every game, right?
That makes a lot of sense going through. Do you think that the way for like Riot to fix that is to maybe increase those queue times? Is that what you would recommend for them to do, is to increase the queue times to fix the issue?
A lot of people have a lot of different hot takes on how to fix it. My current most favorable opinion is making a server for Master, Grandmaster, and higher players based in LA, because that incentivizes every single pro player to actually play and to also try their hardest. Or maybe it doesn't even have to be in LA, just somewhere on the West Coast, so that we get reasonable ping. Because obviously you hear a lot of pros talk about this, but it is really, really annoying going from playing on like 8 to 20 ping on Tournament Realm for scrims, and then going to 60 to 70 for solo queue, and you can't practice certain champions as well as you could if you were on 8 ping. There's so many examples of champions like Zed, Yasuo, for support, like Pyke and Rakan and Thresh aren't insanely mechanically intensive, but like ping matters when you're practicing those champions. And so having boot camped in Korea myself, I can tell you that like it really does make a world of difference when everybody is playing at a relatively low ping. Obviously, that's not possible in North America, but I think it would help.
Okay. Kind of looking at that, obviously, so like I come from like primarily, I actually used to work with some League people, but I like coming from Overwatch, like the metas there get complained about all the time. And I know that for League of Legends, that has been the case for sometimes where people just literally drone on metas. Do you think metas are a huge deal that people should be worried about?
Not particularly. I think it's just the way the game evolves. And, you know, there's obviously always going to be things that are OP. And the best, like, at the end of the day, the best team always ends up winning. So you can't really complain that, like, you know, oh, it's just, like, not my meta or whatever. Because at the end of the day, like, Team Liquid has won for 2 years in a row. And you can't tell me that, like, some of these aren't their meta. Or even if they aren't their meta, they still succeeded in them. So, like, I don't think it's just a valid excuse. I think part of being a pro is adapting to every shift in meta. And, if you can't adapt, then you're just not going to do well.
What do you think makes the difference between a team like Team Liquid and a different team? Like a non-win every single year, or every single thing for 2 years? Like, what is the difference between those two teams?
Well,
other than money, maybe.
I was gonna say they're obviously the highest paid team, but they have a wealth of experience amongst them. Like literally every player in their role has been playing for, I don't know which one of them has been playing the least professionally. Probably Jensen, and he has like 4 years or so of like top level experience, and so I think they're very good at just knowing what to do, when to do it, and if they are not doing well, like there's been weeks where they don't do well, they're quick to solve their problems because they experienced those sort of problems before. I can't really comment too much on their coaching staff, but I could probably say they have a bit to do with it. I just think they're just all experienced, great players, and they're always at the top of their game.
Yeah, so kind of looking at Academy, you've obviously played for Academy, like back and forth here and there. Do you think that Academy is something that is really good for like breeding talent? Is that something that you think that you like being in Academy really helped and prepared you for being an owl? Because I hear like us, like for Overwatch League, we have contenders and then we have the owl, and I would say that there's a massive difference between contenders and owl, at least for Overwatch, right? And I imagine that to some degree that's probably prevalent with Academy versus LCS. At least there is some level of difference. Do you think that Academy prepared you for playing for LCS?
Yeah, for sure it prepares you. I think it teaches you the basics and probably like the intermediate level of team play. I think you'll definitely learn a lot. My first year, especially, or my first split of Academy, especially, as I played with Keen and Shrimp, who the split before had made top 4 in LCS.
Yeah.
And so, like, it was really easy for them to look at me and look at everything I did and just go, you should have been doing this, you should have been doing that. And, like, I just tried to absorb as much as I could from them at the time. And as much as they did do a great job of teaching me a lot, still, when I was put into LCS, I was not like super good. Obviously, there's still, I think, a pretty decent disparity between the two levels of play. But I think Academy will teach you the basics. However, a week or two of LCS practice would probably teach you a split's worth of Academy practice, just because you either adapt quickly to what everybody's doing and just get better, or you're just gonna completely get shit on and get benched. So
Is that something you're ever worried about, is like being completely benched and not able to play? Is that a fear that goes through like your head, or you think other people's heads that you've talked to?
I mean, not particularly. I mean, personally, like currently being in Academy, I feel like my level of play is at least Academy level, if not like bottom to mid tier LCS level, and so it's never been like a huge worry of mine. I think definitely a lot of LCS players have a fire under their ass if their Academy counterpart is like equally as good or like also a veteran. I can't think of any examples off the top of my head right now, but like, for example, last year when C9 was using Jensen and Golden Glue, like, you know, there's a world where Jensen drops the ball a little bit, Golden Glue outperforms him, and now he's the starter. And so, you know, for some teams that could be a reality, but right now, not much that I've heard of.
Okay, so kind of looking at like moving forward, obviously your goal is probably to be like full-time always in the LCS. I'm assuming that is your goal. What do you think is holding you back from getting there? What do you think is like your major flaw that you need to work on in order to actually get there?
Well, I think I was on a pretty good path over the last year and even the last split. I think I definitely didn't play as well as I could have last split. And even at the beginning of the split, I feel like we had a lot of problems as a team. And like, obviously, I think I was underperforming. And also my Academy counterpart was, you know, Woodid, you know, went to Worlds with G2. And so obviously there's no hard feelings when you get benched for someone who I think is probably like equally as skilled as me. As for what's holding me back, I wouldn't say there's anything specifically. I think my thing cut out again. I can't think of anything right now. But
that would seem daunting to me then. Like being in your situation, like not knowing like, okay, this is the trajectory. Do you ever like feel like there's like, oh my God, I just don't know what to do to get to that point where, cause you mentioned you were either a like top level academy or up to mid tier support player for LCS, right? Like that upper echelon of like being the upper half, like that I imagine that is the goal, because that's like every competitor's goal is, right, to get there. Does that ever feel daunting, because it feels like there's no direction then?
I think actually, now that I think about it, I think the thing that haunts me the most is just consistency. I think I've had troubles with it in the past, and there's weeks where I feel like I'm smurfing and I'm playing like, you know, like maybe not core JayJ level, but like up there with like Zazal and Smoothie. And there's weeks where like I'm just running it down every game and I'm like, what am I doing? And so it probably would help to find a lot of consistency and just like staying on point throughout a whole split, which is obviously hard for a lot of players. But I think that's probably where I have to find my groove.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things I wanted to ask you, and something I noticed in some of your interviews, you have a necklace and it has a cross on it.
And
I don't know if you're
to detail.
I try to, because I think that's the important things about people. Does that necklace have any significance? Because I've noticed that you wear it quite a lot.
Yeah, I literally never take it off. I have it with me in the shower. I have it with me when I'm swimming. It's pretty much just my parents gave my brother a cross when he graduated high school, and he's always worn it with him. And they gave mine to me before I moved out of home to move here. And so they're very Christian, religious. I'm not as much, but I still keep it with me, just like as a reminder of them and as a reminder of family, rather than religious significance. Yeah.
Have you ever forgotten it anywhere or taken it off where you feel like lost without it?
No, I literally, once I got it, I only take it off when I get a massage, because my massage therapist says it's easier to work when you don't have it on.
Okay, so you swim with that too? Does it ever get in the way from swimming?
No, not at all.
Huh.
It just kind of follows.
Huh. I always thought that it was kind of cool that you kept it with you and you have it out there all the time, because it seems like it's something that's really, really important to you. So,
yeah, I would say so.
So yeah, you mentioned that you talk to your family quite a bit, at least like once a week. Are they the ones that support you in times when you're like things are going rough? Is that like part of the support network that you have with you? Like if you guys are losing or you're struggling through things, are those the first people that you're going to talk to and kind of talk about it with?
Not entirely. Just because, I don't want to make my parents worried that like my career is on a downward spiral or anything.
It's fair.
I generally just like talk to them about remedial stuff, or like what I've been doing other than practicing, or how practice has been going. But yeah, I generally rely more on like friends and just friends and other players to talk to when things are going bad, because it's easier also to talk to people who know exactly what's going on and can kind of help you figure out like what you need to do.
That makes sense. So kind of looking at one of the things that gets talked about in esports all the time is kind of like burnout. Okay. And and you mentioned like consistency, which like sometimes people are like, oh, people are just like continuously bashing their head against the wall of not knowing to do things, and it can lead to burnout and stuff like that. Do you think that burnout is an issue that you've ever had to suffer with like League of Legends or in esports in general?
Probably. Honestly, I don't think I've felt what people would describe as like true burnout. I would say like there have been times where I'm like where things start to feel repetitive, and you're just scrimming because you have to scrim, but you don't feel as focused as normal. And that's happened to me like in the middle of splits usually, where you're kind of on a routine. 5 days a week or 4 days a week scrim, 2 game days, 1 day off. Spend your day off doing probably the same thing, just playing some solo queue, maybe go out to eat with friends every once in a while. But yeah, I think for me personally, it hasn't been a huge issue, but I think for players who have been playing for longer than myself, it can definitely be an issue, especially if during your off season, or say if you're at the top of your game, like for example, Doublelift was or is all the time, and he continuously goes to MSI and Worlds and stuff like that. I could easily see how someone could get burnt out, but personally, since I do get off seasons and time off, I haven't experienced that. Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. What do you like to do for fun when you're not gaming? Like, what do you do to relieve stress in your life?
Not much. I listen to a lot of music. I have these really nice headphones that I put on all the time. I've been picking guitar back up in the last year or so. I just bought myself a new Fender Telecaster.
Ooh, nice. That is really nice.
Every once in a while, I'll go out to like dinner or movies with some friends. Sometimes people from other teams, mostly people from my team. But
have you mentioned you're picking guitar back up again. Did you play guitar when you were younger?
Yeah, okay, I've played guitar for like probably about 10 years at this point, but I've played very on and off, so I'll pick it up for like a month or two, then I don't play for like 6 months, then I pick it back up, drop it off. So yeah, I'm still like, I would say I'm decent. I can probably play any pop song that isn't too complicated, but yeah, I'm not like insane or anything.
Okay, do you have any musicians that you look up to that you're like, oh my god, if I could play like them, I would, like, this would be the world?
Funnily enough, not really any guitarists. I actually look up, some of my favorite artists right now are Daniel Caesar, who's a singer from Toronto, does like soul and R&B-ish kind of music, and Jacob Collier, who is a like how do I describe it? Like, he plays every instrument basically. Okay. If you ever see one of his live shows, he just loops himself playing like 12 instruments and like harmonizes with himself. He does everything, and so he's also one of my biggest inspirations. But yeah, actually, no, not really any guitarists that I look at and I'm like, wow, I love the way they play guitar.
Have you ever got to play in bands or anything?
Oh yeah, I played in a band in high school. We just did like covers of Arctic Monkeys and like Black Keys stuff for fun. Okay. We did talent shows and whatnot.
Did you sing too then, or were you just a guitar player?
No, I still don't sing. I wasn't that good, so I just did rhythm guitar, and my friend Jeremy would do lead guitar because he's actually really great at it. He works at a recording studio now, so
oh nice.
Yeah, he definitely knew what he was doing back then, and certainly so now.
I've played in bands. They're a lot of fun, especially when you play in front of a crowd. So I imagine it's a similar feeling to probably when you get to play on stage. I imagine it's probably something similar to that. Do you ever have to worry about like anxiety or anything when you're going on stage? I know you talked about it a little bit before, that it's kind of plagued you. I can never say the word. Plagued you like occasionally for certain games here or there. Is that something that you have to like constantly deal with, like nerves and anxiety?
Once you get into the mix of things during the season, not so much. I think at the start of every season, there is a bit of nerves, but I don't think it's just me. I think you can tell across the way people play. Everyone plays a little slower at the start of the split. They're just kind of feeling each other out. There's very few players who don't. Like, off the top of my head, I think Huni is probably the only player who just like doesn't give a fuck, plays the same way like the whole year round. But yeah, I think it's definitely a thing people deal with until the middle or end of the split when they're used to playing on stage.
So one of the things I wanted to ask you about is, like, we haven't really heard anything. The outside hasn't really heard anything from your guys' like players association. Do you have a big role with your players association? Do you like take part and care about what's going on with that?
I've attended every meeting of the players association since I became pro. There are some things like in the works that I probably can't talk about, but I don't know how quickly they're being done. But I find it good just to go, so you're kind of in the loop on the issues that players are suffering from, and like there are definitely a lot of issues that Reddit and Twitter and whatever other social media don't hear about that, you know, I've heard from other players because I've attended those, and just like day-to-day things you wouldn't think about, like contract stuff, living situations, that sort of thing. It's kind of just to make sure that everything is solid and there's no like harm being done to players, or no like, what's the word? Okay, the easiest way I can put it is so you don't fuck over your players, basically.
Okay. Do you feel very safe and protected with that in place? Because I know that when it originally got put in place, a lot of people questioned like the validity of it being put in place. Because Riot was kind of the one that like put it into place, and it from the outside looking in, the organization that is like running everything, building forth and making that, like, you can see how people want anything. Do you feel very protected by this organization, like it has your best interest in heart?
I would say so for the most part, just because it is, while it is being paid for by Riot, the head of the association, Hal, he is being paid for by Riot. A lot of the issues that take place, or a lot of the issues that we want to work on, are either issues with the teams or issues with Riot that they can help us work through. So stuff like, solo queue quality is something that we're not like against Riot. It's like they want to work on us. They want to work with us on it so that we can all find a solution to better it. And so I haven't found that to be an issue at all.
I have to ask, are you someone who's like out there throwing your voice around and getting your opinions? Are you someone who like just likes to sit behind and listen about how things are going?
I generally just like to sit back and listen. I mean, if I'm asked about something, then I'll say whatever my opinion is. But generally, I don't yell my opinions out loud.
Okay. Is there any reason that you don't do it? Do you feel like people better represent like the same ideas that you have, or is there you just don't feel like you have the experience to say, like, what holds you back from saying stuff?
Kind of all of the above, actually. Yeah, just people generally. If I have a point to make, someone else usually makes it, or if I think about something, someone more seniority might do it better. So yeah, I just haven't found a place, really, I think.
Okay. Kind of looking at the upcoming games that you're coming up. So this is just an FYI. This is recorded before the match is kind of played out for that like seeding for Worlds to come out. So people are understanding of when this episode is being aired and recorded, which is why I'm asking this question. So that way later on when we're kind of looking forward to what happens to see how everything went, it'll be either really good or it's going to be a very sad moment for us all. How confident are you guys feeling about your games kind of moving forward here?
Well, I've been just helping out with the team where I can, just like watching scrims and trying to give a bit of feedback here and there, but not too much. And I think we have probably as much of a shot as some of the other teams. I don't think any of the teams in the Gauntlet are super refined, but I don't think we are either. And so it's kind of a toss-up as well, because our team hasn't played on stage in like nearly a month, I think. And so, I'm not sure how they'll perform on stage. Maybe they'll play really well. Maybe they'll play really poorly. But from what I've seen in scrims, I think they definitely have a chance.
So kind of taking that almost like behind the shoulders approach, is that something that you kind of find some enjoyment in, or is this something that you don't really particularly care for? Like, do you like being there to give advice, or is it like, I'm doing this because this is what's best for my team, but I really wish I could play?
I actually don't mind. I think after I'm done playing, coaching is something I would be interested in. The only reason that I'm not like particularly in love with it right now is, well, one, I'm still playing, obviously, but if I wasn't, our current coaching staff pretty much covers every point I want to look at. It's very rare that I'll look at something and tell it to one of the coaches and they'll be like, oh, I didn't think of that. It's usually like, this player should have done that because of that. And they'll be like, I know, already wrote it down. And then I'm just like, okay. It's probably been like maybe 2 or 3 times in the last few weeks that I've pointed something out that the coaches didn't notice.
So do you think that's something I kind of ask you about? It's like coaching in like North America. Do you think that there's a lack of good coaches in there, or do you think that like every coach who's in North America is a really good coach? Do you think that there's places for like openings for maybe people to transition from players to coaches that might be a good fit?
I definitely think it's a pretty good option for a lot of players, especially, if they feel they're heading towards the end of their career. But it's hard for me to comment on the current quality of coaching since I've only been on FlyQuest, and I've been coached by pretty much, I guess, 3 coaches, really, as head coaches, which would be Rapid Star, who's currently assistant coach for C9, Saint Vicious, who is currently a TFT streamer for Liquid, and Invert, who's still our coach. And I think all 3 of them were very different in styles. Rapid Star was very well, first of all, his English wasn't great at the time. It's much better now. So he would talk through a translator, and he was very I think this is correct, so we should do this. Saint was like somewhere in between. I know this is correct, so you should do this, but also taking in more like the veterans like feedback as well and incorporating into her play. And then Invert was pretty new when he got put into the LCS coaching spot, and so he's been very mostly just pointing out, you know, obvious mistakes, and then when there is a discussion to be had, he does a pretty good job of like leading discussion and trying to figure out the solution as a team. And so, other than those three, I don't know any of the other coaches in North America exactly, and That's fair. Really, really hard for I think anyone to tell unless you've played with like under a coach for an entire split how they are as a coach.
Yeah, I mean, I always hear people judge coaches from like the outside, and I like having worked on team. I'm always like, how do you guys know which coaches are actually good or not? Because unless you've worked with them or worked underneath them, you really could never really actually like know that. So
yeah, that's why to me, coach of the split is like the stupidest award, because literally no one will ever know how much work or how much impact a coach has on a team unless you're on that team. And like. Also, side comment, just I hate when people on Reddit or Twitter just say like, oh, this coach should be fired for that draft, because draft is 90% of the time also helped prepared by the players, and the players have almost final say. So if it comes down to like 2 picks and you have to pick one of them, the player usually picks their comfort, even if it's not the ideal pick. Or not usually, but like maybe if it's a regular season game, maybe they'll go with the wild one, but if it's a really important match, a lot of time you end up going with comfort, even though it's not the best, and then coaches get blamed, which shouldn't be the case for the most part.
How much control do you think coaches have? Because like what you talked about there is like it's a little bit of give and take. Do you think that some coaches are more authoritarian where they literally make all the decisions, or do you think that for every team there's at least there's a decent amount of give and take between the teams and the players? Because obviously I'm assuming you talk to a lot of players, so I'm assuming that you have some base level of knowledge based on that, because you don't know what the coach is doing, I'm assuming.
I think a lot of the coaches or most of them are just give and take. I don't know of any that are just like, I made the draft, this is what we're doing. Like, you either like it or you suck it up and play it. I'm pretty sure, pretty much every coach, even if they do kind of like make a draft plan and says like, this is what we're going to stick to, they'll ask the players like, do you prefer this matchup or this matchup? This champion or this champion, this ban or this ban. And like the players usually have a pretty decent amount of input.
Okay. So kind of looking at that, how important are other resources to your team? So you obviously have a coaching staff like analysts and stuff like that. Do you find those things very valuable, or do you not really see their effect because they just go straight to coaches?
Well, personally, we only really got analysts this split. I can't remember if they were with us last split or not, but I have seen.
That's probably an interesting side.
I'm pretty sure they mostly started working with us this split, maybe towards the end of last split a little bit, but they usually just do interesting things with like patterns for enemy teams, or like statistics for scrims, or statistics for scrims versus stage, which I think is like, it can be pretty helpful. You know, you don't take everything the analysts say word for word and like implement it, but you take it into consideration, and I think it's just useful to have them as another tool to help us figure out like what works and what doesn't. Obviously, sometimes the analysts will put like in their work like, I strongly recommend this and I strongly don't recommend this, and that's when like you really think about it, because they're using most of the time stats. And if statistically you are god awful on a champion in scrims and on stage, you're obviously not going to want to play it, even if your player says like, I'm confident on it this time. You might not want to do it anyways. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. So taking with that and moving forward and talking about like careers and long-standing careers, how long do you think your career in esports can last? Because there's obviously been a lot of debate that careers aren't that long versus you look at someone like Doublelift who's literally been in there forever.
Like, how long do you think a career in esports can last? How long do you think you're gonna last in the esports scene before you finally say, okay, I'm done?
Well, I'm gonna last as long as my wrists last, which hopefully is for a long time. I do a lot of stretches and self-care, so I think I'm fine. I don't know how long that is. If it's 3 years, then it's 3 years. If it's 10 years, then it's 10 years. As for like the average player, I think, a lot of players, when they get to the late 20s is when they start caring a little bit more about real life stuff. And so some of them may decide to go into coaching, for example, where you'll have just a little bit more free time, or maybe they'll just choose to go back to normal, just normal people life, get like a normal job, or go back to school, whatever that may be. But I think on average, most pro players are pretty happy about being pro players, and they want to keep it that way as long as they can.
Okay. So I was just like, you hear things all the time that, it's going to be like 2 years or 3 years, but I see players who are very older, and I'm like, I don't really think there necessarily is this age barrier that suddenly this player is 24 and they're screwed and done. And I just don't think that that's actually there. I think that's a bias that we tend to kind of hold through.
Yeah. CL is the oldest team in the LCS. I'm pretty confident in that.
I'm obviously on average. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Huh. So, believe it or not, like, that was actually all the questions that I kind of had for you. I have one more question. That's a lie. I have one last question for you. Okay. And then I'll let you go. So it's a fairly easy question, unless you have some other stuff you want to talk about that you just want to let into the life of JayJ that is super interesting and ecstatically fun. But my last question for you is something I ask everyone. You've had the experience being on the show. Hopefully it's been somewhat fun and unique. Having said that, and having been on here, if you could pick any one person, the only criteria is that they have to be involved in esports and they have to speak English. Who would you want to see come on this show?
Oh, that is a fun question.
And they can be involved in any capacity. So they don't necessarily have to be a player. They don't have to be a coach. I've had broadcasters. I've had casters.
Yeah, I think it would probably be core JayJ, just because he's been widely the most consistent and best support for the last year here. And yeah, I'd just love to pick at his brain and just see what makes him tick.
I haven't actually seen interviews. Does he speak English?
His English is pretty decent. Yeah.
Okay. I wonder if you'd feel comfortable then. I know a lot of people who English isn't their first language. Sometimes they feel a little.
Definitely for a long form interview, he might be a little intimidated. But if
I think it's a
his
good pick.
English was up to par, which I think is probably close to, maybe not quite there yet, then maybe.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I had a lot of fun. I don't know if you had fun, but I had fun. So, and that's really all that matters, right? I just want to thank you so much for being on the show. If you have any shout outs, you're more than welcome to have them. I don't normally give them, but if you want them, you can have them.
Nothing particular. FlyQuest for giving me a job for the last couple of years, and all my past and current teammates for, teaching me all the stuff I do now. Yeah, okay. I think that's pretty much it.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it. For everyone out there, this has been Deep Dives in the Minds of Esports. My name has been Blake Panashevitz, and until next time, I hope you all have a wonderful day.